Vista, then you can see the middle school and high school sites would be at that Wolf Ranch area also. And Pine Creek, within Pine Creek, the elementary school site is in that same neighborhood at North Fork, right adjacent to the Pine Creek High School. And middle school would be the additional part of Chinook Trail, which was always planned to be a K-8. This one shows a different look at it. It just kind of puts everything together on one page. It's nothing new. It says here's the number of students within each high school attendance area at the appropriate level, what schools currently serve that area, and what future sites are available. Okay. By the way, when we say a future site is available, it doesn't mean necessarily that you can go build on it tomorrow. For example, utilities. Developers, we like to go into a site when developers have provided utilities out to that site. And I can tell you that North Fork, near Pine Creek, the utilities are almost right up to the school site. Not the case in many of these other sites. But you can see the totals there. It's 1,368 elementary students, 685 middle, 913 high school students. Okay? And again, that's through 2021. This slide is titled, I don't know how loud to yell this, because it's bolded, caps, and exclamation marked, but apparently this is not the end, he says. 2021 doesn't fulfill the master plan. There are a certain number of units projected to be built through 2021, but that still leaves a balance. What this is showing now is the balance. There's still units that need to be built after 2021. So you can see that the total single-family units is almost 7,000. Total townhomes is 770, and multifamily 331. If you look at the estimated students to the right side, using those same development or unit numbers applying our yield rates against them, show that there's another large number of elementary students out there, 2,600, another 1,200 middle, and 500, just under 600 high school. So that's out there into the future. Granted, that would be probably a different board that would be evaluating it at the time. But that's information to know that this, looking out to 2021, is a relatively short-term view in the grand scheme, in the big picture. Okay, it's the next 6 years of a larger project. And as I've told you before, whether it was last year or 2 years ago or 3 years ago, you ask me how long is it until all of these units are built. And it's my answer for a number of years consecutively has been 20 to 25. Because there is no way to project out that far. We don't know about recessions or economic factors or anything else that may happen between now and then that would slow, decelerate, or accelerate the building. That's it, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
Do you have an enrollment update?
I do. Ready for that? These are drafts. While those are going around, I will say that I have stamped as many places as possible on here that this is a draft, essentially not for public consumption at this point because it's not final. As soon as numbers go out, these are projections. What this represents is enrollment as of today. And the total enrollment, I'll just give you the total numbers so folks in the room know what we're talking about, is 25,610 students today, 25,610. last year's October count. So we're kind of comparing a bit of apples to oranges, because this is not the October count yet, but it's a fairly decent, pretty comfortable it's going to be close, is 25,063. So 25,063 compared to 25,610 represents an increase of 491 students over last year. 491 students over last year. Okay. Represents also a, excuse me, I said 491. It's 547 student increase over last year, which represents about 2.18%. 2.18%. Mark, I think you have that. Can you project that for me? Sorry, I didn't notice it wasn't up there. Thank you. So on this, can you go to the page prior to that, Mark, please? Thank you. So what we see here is on the far left column is obviously all the school names. The next column that's kind of grayed is the estimate of this year's enrollment, which essentially is today's enrollment. Okay? Remember, our October count is October 5th this year. So what you can see here is today's enrollment, and then I've shown you some prior years for comparison. So at the elementary school level, I'm just going to give totals. Last year we had 8,694 students. This year, the non-TCA schools is 8,969. So growth at the elementary level. If we go to the second page now, Mark, please. The top box represents middle schools, middle school enrollment. Last year, the official count was 5,161. This year it's 5,000, as of today, it's 5,225. And the high school is 7434 versus 7459. And then I've got, grabbed TCA's numbers to put in there also, so we can have data to compare. But either way you look at it, there's growth. If we look at the non-TCA numbers, it was 21,289 last year. And as of today, that's good, Mark, right there. As of I'm looking at the blue shaded line. As of today, it's 21,780. And that represents the 491 student growth. TCA represents about 50 students in addition to that. That gives you a look at, remember, I'll remind you also that the October count this year is October, it's not October 1st, it's October 5th. And you can go a few days on either side of that, and the board will get that information as a final, what they call certified count, in early November, after the back and forth with CDE has happened and no school district in Colorado is counting the same student. All that data cleanup kind of stuff happens. So this gives you the, I would remind you again though that this is not final data. Is it going to be significantly far off? No, it's going to be pretty darn close. But it's going to be a few kids off either way, either higher or lower. Okay. With that, I'd be happy to answer questions or take comments.
Oh, well, just real briefly, sure it comes as no surprise to any of us. Oh, first, thank you very much for presenting so comprehensively this tremendous amount of data, but it is such important data, so grateful to receive it, and please thank Mr. Smith for his always superior job. But it isn't surprising to see that there's a tremendous amount of growth. We see it all around us. And I think it's important to recognize that the fact that it's going on in this school district is because of the high-performing nature of District 20, and that there's a very close interrelation between the growth and the fact that this is a desirable school district, one that's that people want to bring their families to. So all of that also goes towards why we're working hard to ensure that it stays that way.
expect a standing ovation.
How could I ever imagine? I would say one other thing before I leave. You've heard us mention many times that we now are at 7,000 more students than we were in 2001. I put 2001 on here. It's on the far right column. So if you look at the total, in 2001 we were 18,137. Today we're 25. As of today, we're 25,610. That's a difference of 7,473 students. So I don't know why I feel the need to justify the number that we keep throwing out there, but there you go. There it is.
In the past, has there been, and I think I already know the answer, has there been much differential between the preliminary counts and official count?
Once we get after Labor Day, there's still an increase after Labor Day. Once we get to about the second week of September, it stabilizes pretty significantly, and we end up pretty darn close. We may be on 25,000 kids. We may be in total 50 kids difference either way, but it's not even enough to change a percentage to a whole percentage number. It's going to be a fractional percentage piece. Pretty reliable at this point.
Just occurred to me, is there anything in these numbers, even the ones we just received, that surprises you or alters anything that's been forecast or used as a basis for our projections going forward?
No, it's you know, especially the report you got about residential development. You know, granted that comes from developers, but it hasn't changed. What they told us 2 years ago and what they told us last year is in line with what they're still telling us. In other words, they're not forecasting any significant acceleration or deceleration either. And as far as student count numbers go, you know, there's always some wobble from one school to the other, but on a district-wide basis, I think it's what we would have expected. You can compare also the last. I'll just give you 5 numbers because I didn't put them on here. The last 5 years, here are the growth numbers, not percentages, just the raw numbers. This year, it's oh, I guess it is on there. I'm sorry. It's at the bottom of your page. 547, 485, 97, which was that year we talked a lot about what was happening in that 1 year because it doesn't match the others. Then it was 508 before that. So, Ms. Johnson, to answer your question, you can look at kind of trending that's happening, and it's a similar trend. It's continuing on a similar trend.
Thanks.
Anything else? Thank you. I appreciate the question, Ms. Johnson, because that was one of the questions that I know we wanted to see with the latest growth numbers is before you can go through prioritization of potential new builds, we need to make sure that our views are as up to date and accurate as. Thank you. We'll do one more, and then we'll take a quick. So we'll take a quick break after we do one more. Report of the 2016 ARC results and 2016 ACT results. Dr. Batchel.
Thank you very much, Dr. Teal.
Hi, guys. Good evening. It's my pleasure to introduce Jolynn Patterson, our Director for Assessment, who is going to provide the board with a presentation on PARC results for 2016 as well as our 2016 ACT results.
Okay. First of all, thank you for your time tonight as I share our PARC and ACT results to date. PARC was completed spring of 2016. The majority of D20 schools completed the assessment online, though a few schools did use paper pencil. At this time, we have received achievement scores. As of yesterday, CDE has started to release growth scores, which are currently embargoed, so we will provide updates at a later time. In 2016, 8 states and the District of Columbia participated in the PARC assessment. targets reminds us that PARC and our new standards have moved the target. Students could be performing at the same level on TCAP in PARC, but receive a different score. The range for meets and exceeds has narrowed, making the bands on the target smaller. It is now harder to meet and exceed than it was in the past. I'm like mirrored, that's good. The PARC assessment has 5 performance levels ranging from exceeded expectations to did not yet meet expectations. This slide outlines English language art scores from District 20, Colorado, and the PARC states. The next slide outlines math scores from District 20, Colorado, and the PARC states. Some highlights from 2016. In English language arts, the met and exceeded for District 20 exceeded Colorado on each of the 7 grade level tests by an average of 14 percentage points. In math, the met and exceeded for District 20 exceeded Colorado in 8 of the 9 grade level content area tests. Participation rates were varied over grade levels, but closely compared to the other large districts in the state of Colorado. This slide outlines the participation rates for English language arts, and the next slide will highlight mathematics. Again, participation rates were similar to those of the state and other large school districts. In the future, we will continue to analyze the data and will begin to look at the subgroups. Dialogue continues with teachers, administrators, and the Learning Services team. We will identify areas of strength and growth for curriculum and instruction. All of this work is supported through the use of our data dashboard, Tableau. The creation of visualizations allows teachers to see their students' performance levels. This is an example of a meets and exceeds for a school. The colored dots represent how each student performed. This information then spurs conversations focused on improving student learning. We will now take a look at Larry, Mr. Borland.
Before we leave that, can you maybe tell us what happened?
So 8th grade math, yes. So I'm gonna read you a little bit that I prepared for you because I just think that way it comes out the way I want it to come out. Because there's changes.
Well, Jolene, I know it's not your fault. So.
Right, I've only had this job 6 weeks. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, last year's grade levels. So here's an example of how the effects of the math scores. Last year's grade levels for geometry testing differed from this year's tested grade levels. For example, various students in grades 9 through 11 took geometry last year. This year, various students in grades 8 and 9 took geometry. In addition, I got some more for you. In addition, not all districts use the same protocol for determining which students take which math test. This creates some challenges when analyzing trends from one year to the next and one district to the next, in comparing apples to apples. So we are certainly looking at our geometry data, and one of the strategies we're using to overcome the trend analysis challenges is to look at individual student scores to uncover the insights of performance. So that's a lot of words to say. That what we need is data in the future that will give us a little bit more information, because we have the 2 points. We have the year before this year and this year, and the kids have taken, in some cases, a different levels math test that they did in the past. So in 8th grade, in the past they may have taken 8th grade mathematics, but now they have the option of taking 8th grade mathematics, Algebra 1, or geometry, depending on their class placement.
Gotcha.
So you're saying they might have been taking Algebra 1, but then they ended up taking, because they were added, but then they were taking tests that reflects
Yes.
8th grade math.
Absolutely.
rather than Algebra.
Well, I have a couple. So, why, again, were there no computer-based testing at those schools listed on the slide? You know, it says except TCA or except AAHS. How come?
They chose to do a paper testing instead of
Oh,
online.
you said that. Okay.
And in,
I thought you did. Yes. All
I
right.
think I did.
I think you did, and I apologize for asking. And then, is that all the states that required is that all the states there were at the end of the day that were required to give the PARC?
Correct, in last year's testing year, because they could choose between PARC and Smarter Balance.
Interesting.
And so those are the PARC states.
All the states that did PARC, there's obviously a bunch that, many of them that did computerized, and then many of them that did paper and pencil. They break out differences in scores between those that took computerized, those that took paper, those that did on paper.
They
You know,
did.
they sit out there.
They did analyze the results, and they did make adjustments based on, very much more complicated, I'm gonna say mathematical equations, but looking at the difference because they felt like there were some inflated scores from paper, and so they did make some adjustments from CDE did. What we don't have is a lot of information on how the equations, in those pieces, they have not provided that background information.
The algorithms behind the adjustments.
Right.
It's interesting to look at this because there's only one true southern state, Louisiana, which it doesn't seem like this would be a tremendously representative sample. Actually, Massachusetts #1 in the country in terms of educational results, but then there's some that are not. So, I don't know what the value of that would be, but anyway.
And the state board yesterday, they are trying to move it to do everything they can to move away from PARC from the state board level.
Wow.
So so many other states have done that, so we'll see where that ends up.
Interesting. Thank
What
you.
will happen is that as we've transitioned from test to test to test, one of the important things is growth model. And we're not going to be able to have a growth model because we're really short on a growth model now.
Yeah.
And if we make a transition, then we'll have a couple of years we don't have growth.
But there's also a big movement for school districts to develop their own tests, and maybe that will be what comes out. So, sorry, continue.
It's always exciting, forever changing. All right, so now we're going to take a look at our ACT results.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, you got to think back. You have all the states that are listed in, that did PARC. Colorado is obviously one of them, and CDE is making a change or potentially making a change for that. Do you know what's happening in all the other states? Are they doing the same thing?
The states that are currently in PARC.
That are currently in PARC. Do you know if there's any movement afoot for them to change?
I haven't heard anything yet or read anything about that yet. There seemed to be when the exodus happened, there was, about 22 states originally that were in PARC. And then through, I don't know, over the last 18 months is when it all happened. And it's been pretty quiet for a while. So, I don't know what we have to, the state has to give assessments. We have to. And right now, that assessment that we have is PARC. And it's very expensive to develop your own assessment. Very expensive, like over $25 million. So if they decide not to use PARC, they're going to have to scramble and figure out something else.
You have to have at least one national standard. Otherwise, when people apply to, universities or schools outside of your state, they won't have any reason to respect those results. So it's an interesting conversation.
It is very interesting.
I'm sure more to come. All right, so ACT. ACT provides a score of 1 to 36 in each of the following content areas: English, mathematics, reading, science, and then a composite score, which is an average of those 4 content areas. Here we see each of the tested content areas, the length of time each test is given, and the number of questions or prompts provided on the ACT test. The exam is administered to all 11th grade students in Colorado on specific dates. ACT is one of the Colorado assessments used for accountability purposes. Next year, Colorado will be moving to the SAT for 11th grade students and the PSAT for 10th grade students.
This year.
Did I say next year?
17.
Thank you. This year, which is technically next year when 2017 comes, but but you are correct. This slide highlights the 5-year trends of our ACT results. In 2016, District 20's 11th grade students posted a composite score of 22.7. In the state of Colorado, the composite score was 20.4. The composite score of 22.7 was the highest ever posted by District 20 juniors, 0.3 higher than 2015. Additionally, the mean score exceeded 4 content areas of the test by an average of 2.2 points.
Looks like one of the primary drivers, I was looking at the chart that you have for the matrix, and without 0.3, one of the primary drivers between 16 is in reading, making 0.7, 5, 8 thoughts. Comments on going 0.8 lift is a really big number.
Significant.
Yes.
What we look at is what's interesting or tricky about this is ACT is looking at those career and readiness skills, so they're looking at what kids need in order to be successful in college. So I have not honestly spent time analyzing that piece. What we were happy about or felt good about is that we had gone up as a district and we're still very competitive. And so that will be a piece, because one of the things that's important when you look at assessment is looking at all of our data. And so now that we're getting data from PARC, we have our CMAS scores that had science, social studies, now we'll have language arts and math, we'll have achievement and growth here by the end of the month. And so looking at all those pieces together may tell us a story on why that reading score showed a greater growth. Oops, wait, I have to tell you about that slide. Each year, ACT reports scores for the most recent graduating class. These scores include the most recent ACT test taken by the graduating seniors of the class of 2016. This score may represent the test taken during the Colorado ACT test dates during junior year, or an ACT test taken during their senior year. Students may choose to take the ACT multiple times, and in these cases, the most recent score is reported. National graduating class ACT scores are not used for Colorado accountability purposes. Here we can take a look at the scores over a 7-year trend in each of the tested content areas. Academy 2016 graduates posted increases or remained stable compared to 2015 graduates in 2 of the 4 content area tests. Graduates posted scores exceeding those of the state on all 4 content areas tested, and the composite score of an average of 2.3 points.